Tonight on the Worldview Weekend Hour, the globalists admit on their own website they're using the coronavirus as the center to bring about global governance, including a digital economy, a digital society. But they admit they need to know what to do about America. My friends, you're going to see the screenshots. You're going to see all the proof. They're admitting it now. It's out and open. They're going for global governance, and they're using the crisis of the coronavirus. But has the coronavirus also been used as a psychological warfare program against the American people, as the Tavistock Institute talked about years ago, and as we documented in our movie, Siege? Have they created such contradictions and mixed messages and fear and anxiety that many Americans now, not knowing what to believe, who to believe, have thrown up their arms in either frustration or fear and are surrendering some of their civil liberties? Is it that easy to take over America? The Worldview Weekend Hour begins right now.
WVW-TV presents the Worldview Weekend Hour with Brandon House. Whether the topic is law, science, government, economics, history, family, social issues, education, or theology, Brandon brings the issues of today into clear focus through the lens of a biblical worldview. And now, here is your host, Brandon House.
Good evening and welcome to the Worldview Weekend Hour. Tonight we're going to talk about the coronavirus and how the globalists are now admitting it is in the center of their plans for global governance. You're going to see screenshots and an interactive wheel that has been created by the World Economic Forum. You're also going to find out about the world view of the World Economic Forum. You're going to find out who their founder is, who his wife is. You're going to find out about what I believe has been a systematic psychological warfare program carried out on the American people by exploiting the coronavirus. Now, before we go to our first screenshot, please understand, we're not saying the coronavirus isn't dangerous and a real threat. Indeed, we've seen the stories. What we're saying is, like all good crises, they have to exploit them, don't they? The cultural Marxists, the globalist, they've admitted that. Rahm Emanuel, his famous quote, "You can't let a good crisis go to waste." The Fabian window shows the world on fire, pulling the world out of a crisis and then using it to remold the world nearer to their globalist heart's desire. But I believe I'm going to share with something with you tonight that I'm not aware of anyone else sharing. And maybe it's because they don't know about the Tavistock Institute. Well, we know about the Tavistock Institute because I have a whole section in my documentary that came out in December, 8.5-hour documentary, Siege. I have a whole section on the Tavistock Institute. As you'll see tonight, the Tavistock Institute studied people who had been through war, prisoners of war. And they studied how the shock, the awe, the anxiety, the fear was used to condition the prisoner of war or the man of war to agree to change his thoughts, his ideas, his behavior. In other words, the stress, the anxiety caused them to throw up their arms and surrender to the wishes and will of the enemy. The Tavistock Institute studied the POW, the men of war who had been put through such tragedy. And then they related it to society. How could you bombard the American people? How could you use mixed messages, fear, anxiety, reassurance, and then fear and anxiety again, to cause people to throw up their arms and surrender, or to be put into such trauma and shock that they are open to suggestions that they otherwise would not be open to. It's a psychological process, again, I detailed in my docu-movie Siege that came out in December of 2019. But did you know that one of the leaders of the Tavistock Institute was directly connected to one of the first leaders of the World Health Organization? Have you heard a lot about the World Health Organization during this coronavirus pandemic? Do you know about the World Health Organization? Well, tonight, let's look at the different players and what they're openly admitting, as they are now admitting on the website of the World Economic Forum, that the coronavirus is at the very center of their plans for world government. Look at the screen, if you would, here. Here is the website of the World Economic Forum. And when you go to the World Economic Forum website and you come to this strategic intelligence report they have, the first thing pops up is this right here, coronavirus or COVID-19, right in the center. Now, this is their website. Now, if you go and you change this wheel, it's not going to say that anymore. But when you first initially come to this website, if you exit and come back in, the first thing is this setting right here. Then as we begin to move around the screen, you'll notice what happens. Isn't that interesting? Now, we can do this with all sorts of things. We can take any of these out here. Global governance. The print is small. You might have a hard time seeing it. But I clicked on global governance, and then now look what's in the center. Now I can click on anti-globalism. Now look what happens. Now we have all kinds of things that begin to pop up. Now, I have set up an account, and I'm not going to log into it right now, but I have set up an account. Maybe I will log into it right now if it'll show my password, but oh well, I won't worry about that now. But I have set up and I have become a member. And now what normally happens is off on the right here pops up articles, and I can read extensively what they're calling for in these various ideas. Or maybe I want to look at taxation. I can click on that. Now taxation is in the center of the wheel. I can look up inequality in taxation. And now looky here. Now we got banking and capital markets. I could click on values. Well, they want to promote values, do they? Let's find out about the values. Oh, they want to promote the common good. What have we learned through our years of study together? Common good is another word for what? Social justice. And so we now have behavioral sciences. They want to promote values of social justice or common good through one of the things off to the right here, behavioral sciences. We click on that. That opens that up. Now we're into behavioral sciences. Wait a minute, we want to use behavioral sciences to change their view and changing behavior for sustainability. Now, isn't that interesting? And again, global health will be used to change their worldview in the area of sustainable development. See, this could go on for hours. And then off on the right, if I was logged in, I would start seeing a lot of free articles. One of the things I find immediately on the website is all the agendas, all the parts that make up Agenda 21 are now known as Agenda 2030, Sustainable Development under the UN. So if I wanted to go this route, I could do that, and I could type in gender equality, and then in the center would pop up gender equality, inclusive work practices. We'd see that, gender norms, we'd see that. And so we could begin to look at how they plan to use the different aspects of Agenda 2030 to, well, accomplish their worldview agenda. Climate change, I could click that. Obviously, climate change will then come to the center of the wheel, and I could begin to look at how they're going to use that. Maybe the Paris Agreement. Obviously, it brings up sustainable development over here. I click on that. Sustainable development goes to the center. Now, again, you could spend hours. I spent a day and a half on this. When I'm logged in again, on the right, I have all kinds of articles that I can go to that allow me to see how they intend to accomplish these goals. Now, I hope some of you will go there and spend some time. But in the meantime, I'm going to show you still shots tonight. And our topic is, globalists admit the coronavirus is at the center of the wheel for global governance. Now, again, here's the screenshot I originally showed you on the fact that they've put coronavirus at the very center, or COVID-19. Don't forget in our past programs that you can watch at wvwtv.com. But you remember we talked about the Event 201 held in October of 2019, sponsored by who? John Hopkins Center. This week on radio, I'm going to do a whole hour on the John Hopkins Center and tell you everything you need to know about them, their worldview, because it's their map we keep seeing. But it was also sponsored by the World Economic Forum. Well, that's the website we just came from. This is the World Economic Forum. The World Economic Forum that now wants to use the coronavirus as the center for bringing about global governance. The World Economic Forum, working in conjunction with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, had an event called Event 201 in October of 2019 on practicing and getting ready for a pandemic and how to exploit it. And what does it say? The exercise illustrated areas where public-private partnerships will be necessary. Now, that's a phrase, by the way, that has been used by the White House over and over. In my books, Grave Influence, in my book, Marxianity, I talk extensively about the public-private partnership. Big government, big business. In fact, in my book back in 1995, I warned about the fact that America was going to a form of government, big business together, corporate fascism. That was 1995. People mocked it. They're not so much now. Look how much the big companies, the big tech companies control our lives. Well, again, we saw who sponsored the Event 201, the Gates. And of course, Bill Gates is running around now talking about the need to do what? Get everybody vaccinated and get them a digital certificate and such as that. Well, we also have talked in our past programs about the digital dollar, right? The last stimulus bill, the coronavirus stimulus bill, had the digital dollar in it. It got pulled out. And we talked to you all about that, didn't we? And we went to the Digital Dollar Project website. And who did we see was involved in that? Accenture. And it was going to create a Federal Reserve digital dollar. We also see that David Treat with Accenture, in his bio, that he was a part of ID 2020. That's something else we've looked at, ID 2020. That's, again, the idea of biometrics and biochipping. And look, he's a member of the World Economic Forum. You see how these people are all connected together? He's a part of the World Economic Forum. He's a part of ID 2020, and he's part of the Digital Dollar Project, the Digital Dollar Project. Then we see ID 2020, launched in January 2019. It's an alliance launched the ID 2020 certificate mark where? At the World Economic Forum in Davos. So here we have, folks, again, the very group whose website we started out with, the World Economic Forum, putting this all in the center of their wheel, the coronavirus, and all these groups work together for the goal when it comes down to practicing for such events and the digital dollar. Pretty interesting, don't you think? Were they just waiting for a good crisis to come about they could exploit? Who's this man? This is the founder of the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab. Here's his bio. Look at that. 1993-95, member of the United Nations High-Level Advisory Board on Sustainable Development. Wow, that's interesting. Any new people, do you not know what sustainable development is? Let me tell you real quick. It came from the United Nations in the early 90s. It was known as Agenda 21. They changed the name to Agenda 2030. They want to accomplish all this by 2030. George H. Bush got us into this. It comes from the UN through Stephen Rockefeller, Maurice Strong, Mikhail Gorbachev, and others. And it's basically global governance using environmentalism as a crisis to get it done. You talk about the end of private property, the end of your Second Amendment, public housing for everyone, socialized medicine to the extreme, population control. I mean, it's world international socialism and government authority being given over to government bodies and the end of national sovereignty. It's about open borders, open society. That was Agenda 21, launched in the early 90s. I talk about it again extensively in my book, Grave Influence. Now, the name has now been changed to Agenda 2030, but it's part of sustainable development. Again, I have a whole section on it in our documentary Siege, because Siege includes how they're using crises to move us toward global governance. So I have a whole section in the documentary Siege at siegethemovie.com about sustainable development. That's what this guy has been a part of. So the head of the World Economic Forum who founded it is tied in with the UN, Sustainable Development, and then he's been a part of the United Nations Committee for Development Planning. Notice also in his bio, he got an honorary doctorate from the London School of Economics. That's the Fabian Socialist School. When you go to this Economic World Forum page, you set up an account, you'll be able to see, as off to the right, articles. Coronavirus has made extending the Brexit deadline a necessity. Well, that is from the London School of Economics. The London School of Economics articles keep popping up to show you what it is, among other articles, what they want to do and why. And they're leaning on the London School of Economics. Well, no wonder they're leaning on the London School of Economics. This guy, the founder of the Economic World Forum, Klaus Schwab, got his honorary doctorate from the London School of Economics, which is the Fabian Socialist School. There's the Fabian window, created by George Bernard Shaw, that we've shown you many, many times, created in 1910, pulling the world out of a fire behind the man in the red coat. There's some kind of crisis. Look at the man to the far left in the blue or purplish looking robe. What is he doing? He's using some kind of bellow to stoke the fire, to make it bigger. He's taken a crisis and he's making it bigger and he's exploiting it to put the world further on fire. They pull it out of the crisis, the globalists do, and they're remolding it. One's holding it with a tong, and the other has got it on an anvil, and they're banging on it. At the top, what does it say? Remold it near to the heart's desire. Created by Fabian socialist George Bernard Shaw. The Labor Party, Tony Blair and those guys, Gordon Brown, who recently said we need to use the coronavirus for world government. They're all part of the Labor Party. That's all tied back to the Fabian Socialist Society. This is not conspiracy, folks. This is documented history. These people are proud of it. Tony Blair unveiled the Fabian window a few years ago and gave a speech because the window was stolen. It showed up at an auction. It was returned. Tony Blair unveiled the Fabian window, which you can go see there in Great Britain, and he praised it. Now, notice this. This is the United Nations Development Program. And it says SDG, Innovative Finance. What is that? Sustainable Development Goals, Innovative Finance. And it's part of the United Nations Development Program. Now, why am I showing you this? Because the founder of the Economic World Forum, his wife, sits there as one of the leaders of it with the United Nations to push forward sustainable development. Here's again the World Economic Forum. Leadership and governance. The World Economic Forum is the international organization for public-private cooperation. Okay, again, what is the point I'm making? They're deliberately, for many, many years, Mr. Klaus Schwab has been known for pushing the idea of big government, big business to come together. And now what are they promoting? Now they're promoting the idea of the public sector, the private sector, and the civil society. What's another word for civil society? Well, it includes also civil organizations, nonprofits. In this book, Grave Influence, and in this book, Marxianity, I warned extensively about them using the three-legged stool. This has also been promoted by Peter Drucker. It's been promoted by Rick Warren. It's been promoted by Bob Buford. It's been promoted by Bill Hybels. It is known as the three-legged stool. Bob Buford and Peter Drucker really kicked this off in America big time and got religious organizations and churches and mega churches involved. And the goal is big government, big business, and the social sector, nonprofits, community organizations working together to solve the world's global giants. And so it may sound good, but what you're talking about is a form of distribution of power away from your local community and your state constitutions and your U.S. Constitution, and instead you're distributing the power away from your elected officials and to unelected bureaucrats who are experts in various fields. This is called technocracy. Technocracy. This is not a good idea. And again, this is where you end up with all these globalist committees running your state, running our government, and tied all the way back and been trained and funded through the United Nations and sustainable development. So this would fit into that three-legged stool that we've been warning about for years. Now, if you want to know a little bit about the World Economic Forum, they say meet our young global leaders for 2020. And one of the people they want you to meet is Alicia Garza. You know who she is? One of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter. She's a communist, folks. This is a communist organization, Black Lives Matter. I deal with it in my movie Sabotage. If you don't believe me, I deal with it in great detail in my movie Sabotage at sabotagethemovie.com, Black Lives Matter. Okay? So does that give you an idea about the World Economic Forum, who, by the way, also had the president of China come and speak to them a few years ago to help them with global governance? The leader of the communist regime of China, Red China, the Chi-Coms. That's the World Economic Forum. Well, again, we've seen that they want to use COVID action platform and all the areas they want to use that to shape society now. Shaping the future of technology governance, smart cities, shaping the future of the new economy and society. So they want a new society, folks. Shaping the future of digital economy. So we're going to go to a cashless digital economy. Shaping the future of financial monetary systems. Shaping the future of media, entertainment, and culture. We're going to use the power of the media to change people's minds. So let's go through this grid a little bit more. Notice here we have global governance. That's one of their goals, right at the center. Now, off to the side, they have anti-globalism. They have all kinds of things. But let's go over to the far left where it talks about institutional pluralism. Notice that one of the things they want, and maybe you can't see it, but it says financial and a monetary system. So they want a new financial and monetary system. Now, notice at the bottom where I have this arrow. What's it say there? It might be too small for you to see, but the reason we have to do this is to prove to you that we're not making this up. This is an actual screenshot. But under global governance and institutional pluralism, that leads us down to the bottom where the arrow is on that wheel, and it's global health. Now, why is that important? Because eventually that leads us to mental health. And a part of mental health is what? To the right, continuous monitoring. How are they going to do continuous monitoring? Well, look where the arrow goes. to the top right. It says digital economy and society. So continuous monitoring for mental health through a digital economy, a digital society. Can you say Big Brother? Can you say George Orwell? And at the bottom, what's it say? Behavioral sciences. So this involves mental health, continuous monitoring, and it includes behavioral sciences. Now let's get into that a little bit more. But first, look at this. World Economic Forum. COVID-19 sparked an economic crisis like no other. But these measures can help now. Who can help? The World Health Organization and the International Monetary Fund. Wait a minute. Let's just stop right there. International Monetary Fund. We're going to do a whole Sunday night. I was going to do it tonight, but we pushed it off for this. Next Sunday night, unless there's breaking news, on the coronavirus bailout, the fallout, and how to respond. The coronavirus bailout, the fallout, and how to respond. Because, folks, if things get back to normal, say by July or August, and everything looks like it's normal on the surface, it'd be like sitting at a beautiful beach one day and noticing the sun shining on the ocean as the waves crash in, and you're thinking, this is a beautiful, calm day. What a beautiful day. But what you can't see, as everything has gone back to normal, is that underneath is a dangerous riptide that if you swam out there could suck you right under and you'd drown. We may go back to things looking normal. We may not either, but we may go back to things looking very normal. But I'm telling you, behind the scenes, underneath the calm scenery, will be a dangerous undercurrent that is life-threatening to the future of our country. And it involves our banking and many other things that are going on behind the scenes that I want to explain to you in a special that we pushed off till next week, barring any breaking news, the coronavirus bailout, the fallout, and how to respond. Well, the International Monetary Fund, they say, should step in and help, says the World Economic Forum. That's an organization that was started in part by, well, Fabian socialist John Maynard Keynes, who said by a continuous process of inflation, we can steal the majority of the people's wealth and not one man in a million will know what we're doing. I have a whole chapter on him in my book, Grave Influence, John Maynard Keynes. He helped to start the International Monetary Fund. Well, they created in 1969 something known as SDRs, special drawing rights, really the beginning of the form of a global currency that can be built upon. And so now the International Monetary Fund, highly dominated by Europe, can come in and begin to help create a global system economically. And they'll rely in part on the International Monetary Fund. But they also say they're going to rely on the World Health Organization. Well, how much do you know about the World Health Organization? Look at this slide. This is a guy by the name of G. Brock Chisholm. He was a Canadian psychiatrist and medical practitioner, and he was the first Director General of the World Health Organization in 1948, and in 1957 became President of the World Federation of Mental Health. But notice, he was the first Director General of the World Health Organization in 1948, G. Brock Chisholm. In fact, if you go to the World Federation for Mental Health website, you see this screenshot. It said, George Brock Chisholm was the first director of the World Health Organization who suggested that the World Federation of Mental Health be created. A radical thinker, Chisholm's view that health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity, provided early direction for both the World Health Organization and for the World Federation of Mental Health. Chisholm's close friend, are you paying attention? Chisholm's close friend, Jack Rawlings Rees, a British military psychiatrist and a founder of the renowned Tavistock Clinic, accepted the challenge. Isn't that interesting? So, again, the man that helped start, or who was the original Director General of the World Health Organization, part of the UN, G. Brock Chisholm, was good friends with Jack Rawlings Rees. Well, what is the Tavistock Institute? Because I just told you that Jack Rawlings Rees worked with him and accepted this challenge from Mr. Chisholm. But he was with the Tavistock Institute. What's the Tavistock Institute? Well, psychiatrist Dr. William Sargent of the Tavistock Institute explained a process in his book in 1957 called The Battle for the Mind, which helps you understand what the Tavistock Institute was up to and what they're doing, I think, today through the coronavirus that the globalists have picked up on from the Tavistock Institute. This is what the psychiatrist Dr. William Sargent wrote in his 1957 book, The Battle for the Mind. Quote, various types of belief can be implanted in many people after brain function has been sufficiently disturbed by accidentally or deliberately induced fear, anger, or excitement. Notice again, various types of belief can be implanted in many people after brain function has been sufficiently disturbed by accidentally or deliberately induced fear, anger, or excitement. Of the results caused by such disturbances, the most common one is temporarily impaired judgment and heightened suggestibility. Its various group manifestations are sometimes classed under the heading of herd instincts and appear most spectacularly in wartime, during severe epidemics, and in all similar periods of common danger, which increase anxiety and so individual and mass suggestibility, end quote. My friends, is that not what we've seen? If someone had told you 6 months ago that a virus would cause us to close down the entire economy and ask 90 some odd % of the country to shut down, stay at home over a virus, and that a $2.2 trillion bill would be written before even 250 people were confirmed dead, and that's what happened, you would say that would never happen. That's crazy talk. If you said that people would be arrested for holding church services or arrested for going out on their paddleboard, you would say that's crazy talk. We live in a country where you have due process. You have state constitutions and you have a U.S. Constitution. Well, they would have to implement martial law to do that. Well, you could say, well, they will implement a form of it, but they don't want to call it that for political reasons, but they're going to go ahead and pretty much do the things you would do under martial law, like arrest people for gathering together. Now, I'm not saying that there shouldn't be this social distancing and being careful, and maybe it's a good time not to have church services for a while and that kind of thing. I'm not saying that. But if someone had suggested to you 6 months ago what we're now going through, and that the American people would largely give it up and go along with it, you would say, I think it'll take a bigger crisis than that. I think it'll take something much bigger than that. I can't see that. No, that would never happen. That would never happen. And yet, are you not shocked when you watch social media? I am. My wife tells me the things that are going on social media, even in our own community, where last night people were having a fit on social media in our town because some people were spotted having a bonfire in their driveway with five people around a bonfire in their driveway, and people were coming unglued. People are snitching and calling the cops on people because they're not doing what they think they should be doing in this crisis. Now, some could say, well, they're being selfish. They're putting other people at risk. I understand that. But yet at the same time, there are other things this country has gone through, and we didn't all isolate. We identified the sick, and we quarantined the sick. We had kids being put in iron lungs with polio. Did we shut down the whole economy? The point I'm making isn't that there should not be measures at times put into place to protect people. But what we have seen, I believe, is an overreach that has damaged many of our constitutional rights and not done in a manner consistent with our organic documents at the state or federal level. And if the American people with a little virus have been so confused with mixed messages coming out of the local, state, and federal government, mixed messages, wear a mask, no, don't wear a mask, oh, now you got to wear a mask, so many different mixed messages and so much fear that many Americans have done exactly what the Tavistock Institute talked about. They've thrown up their arms and they have surrendered. And what were people saying on the local app in our town about people having a bonfire pit with 5 people, or going to Lowe's to do some shopping and buy some flowers as spring is really sprung here in the South and the trees are fully bloomed and people want to plant flowers or put in a garden? No, you don't need to go do that. You need to stay at home. You just need to do what the government tells you. This is the South. And there are people rolling over by like a bunch of ninnies here in the South to tyranny and telling everybody else what they got to do. Well, wait a minute. If they shouldn't be going to Lowe's, then close down Lowe's. But Lowe's is open, and if you want to go to Lowe's and do social distancing, that's your business. But no, there are people in your town that will shame you all over social media if you say you're at Lowe's buying a plat of flowers. The point I'm making is this has largely been a psychological process that has been exploited. And most people don't know what I'm talking about. It's all detailed in my docu-movie Siege that came out in December of 2019. SiegeTheMovie.com. It's 8.5 hours. Also goes into how, yes, we are preparing for war with Russia and China. That'll be the next thing that shocks people, or cyber hacking, or an EMP. They weren't ready for this. They weren't prepared for this. They're caught off guard by this. Well, you want to know the other things you should be prepared for and getting ready for? That's why I put out this docu-movie, 8.5 hours, with former FBI, CIA, DHS, former KGB officer, Siege, the clear and present dangers pushing America to the brink of a Marxist Islamic revolution, civil war, World War III, and globalism. and the American people have all but rolled over and given up their constitutional rights virtually without a whimper. And I believe Donald Trump has been caught in a medical deep state trap, and now he's trying to figure out how to get things back going again. Because the World Health Organization is tied to the UN. This is an organization started by a guy who deliberately wanted to create world government. And if you didn't agree with world government, as you're going to see, you were mentally ill. They openly admitted they're going to use the media and movies and film to push mental health, mental hygiene, and global governance. Conservatives and those opposed to such will be deemed mentally ill. You will have toxic masculinity. You'll have white privilege. You'll have all kinds of problems that make you a potential terrorist. And these are the people at the World Health Organization. These are the people tied to the World Economic Forum, tied to the UN, Sustainable Development, Agenda 21. Agenda 21 is about stealing your rights, God-given constitutional rights for international socialism. And these are the organizations that have been pushing this whole coronavirus overreach. Dr. Fauci. I've got an article where he's bragging how his thinking was changed and formed by his years of education in Jesuit schools. Well, you remember the last several Sunday nights? We did our whole series on information warfare and American Christians, and we looked at the writings of former Jesuit Malachi Martin. Malachi Martin was a Jesuit who finally got out because he said after the Vatican Council II in the 60s, hey, these Jesuits are Marxist and they're taking over. They've lowered the barriers between the Catholic Church and other denominations. They're bringing in Marxism, and he asked to be relieved of his duties, moved to New York, and began writing New York Times bestsellers. This one included, along with many, many others that we showed you the screenshots of. And what did he say, the former Jesuit Malachi Martin? That the Jesuits would usher in world government, de-Christianize the Western mind, destroy the Catholic Church, the Protestant Church, the best they could by infiltrating every power center they could for world government. And Fauci, he's bragging about his Jesuit upbringing. How the Jesuits literally taught him how to think and reason. You want to start researching the Johns Hopkins University and who's connected to that and what their worldview is? And pretty soon you start finding out all the players, my friends, do not have the worldview of you or me, nor do many of them ever agree with the policies of Donald Trump. They're all for, most of them, almost every one of them is for the UN agenda, sustainable development, world government. So here we see that the World Health Organization, their founder, tied right back to the Tavistock guys. Well, the Tavistock was about using a crisis to get people to be open to suggestions they otherwise would not. April 11th, 1933, the Rockefeller Foundation president, Max Mason, assured trustees that in their program, quote, the social sciences will concern themselves with the rationalization of social control, the control of human behavior, end quote. Wait a minute, who? The Rockefeller Foundation. Yep. Well, my friend Dennis Cuddy said this led to a Rockefeller grant that resulted in the birth of the Tavistock Institution of Human Relation in London in 1947. Tavistock would join Kurt Lewin's Research Center for Group Dynamics at the University of Michigan the next year to begin the publication of International Journal for Human Relations. And by the way, these are Kurt Lewin and these guys, these are all connected back to the Frankfurt School, cultural Marxists at the Frankfurt School. So we've seen the history of the World Health Organization. And again, we've seen that the World Health Organization is pushing the UN, Sustainable Development. It's a part of the UN and these 17 goals, which the World Economic Forum is pushing. Now, let's find out a little bit more about Mr. Brock, because again, Mr. Brock was the first director of the World Health Organization. Let's find out about the worldview of Mr. Brock and the WHO, which continues today and is behind the coronavirus program here. In a speech in Washington, D.C. in 1945, Dr. G. Brock Chisholm declared, quote, what basic psychological distortion can be found in every civilization of which we know nothing? The only psychological force capable of producing these perversions is morality. The concept of right and wrong. The reinterpretation and eventual eradication of the concepts of right and wrong are the belated objectives of nearly all psychotherapy. Wait a minute. What's the goal of psychotherapy? Eliminating the concept of right and wrong. Now, Mr. Brock, the first director of the World Health Organization, goes on to say, if the race is to be freed from its crippling burden of good and evil, it must be psychiatrists who take the original responsibility, end quote. Well, let's go back to the World Economic Forum website and their little wheel. And what did I find? Future of media, entertainment, and culture. They're going to use media, entertainment, and culture. Wait a minute, isn't that what the Frankfurt School guys wanted? The Frankfurt Schools guys who came here from Germany around 1933, what was called the Marxist Institute in Germany, came here to America, dropped down by John Dewey, Brandeis, Berkeley, Princeton, other places to implement cultural Marxism, change the values, attack the existing morality of the culture, change their values. They'll automatically will not want a constitutional republic. They'll want socialism. Change their values. And again, the Tavistock Institute is tied back to some of the Frankfurt School guys. But what did they say? We're going to use media and education to change people's values. Change their values, they'll want a whole other form of government. What is the Economic World Forum wheel saying? Future of media, entertainment, and culture. And so, because I, again, joined, I can log in and look at articles. And here's what they said. The global media and entertainment landscape has been upended by new business models, consumer-driven content, and digital consumption and distribution. The instability has a direct impact on media output that has power to mold cultures and societies. So they're going to mold cultures and societies using media, these globalists. Now, here is John Rawlings Rees. John Rawlings Rees, as we've already seen, is a part of the Tavistock Institute. Look what he said. Again, he's working with his buddy, Mr. Chisholm, who was the first director of the World Health Organization. But Mr. Rees of the Tavistock Institute, October 1940, before the National Council for Mental Hygiene, said, quote, "This council has recently been cooperating in some experiments with films. Those of you who know books and their authors and films and their makers might be doing some long-term planning of the right kind of propaganda," end quote. So again, the folks over there at the Economic World Forum are openly stating, hey, we're going to use what? The future of media, entertainment, and culture to do what? To mold cultures and societies. Well, not shocked that the Economic World Forum and those guys are doing this, because this is exactly what the folks at the Tavistock Institute, and they all run in the same worldview circles, were wanting to do. Use films to plan the right kind of propaganda. And his speech in 1940 before the National Council for Mental Hygiene, John Rawlings Rees of the Tavistock Institute said, quote, "Don't let us mention mental hygiene, though we can safely write in terms of mental health and common sense," end quote. Why is it called mental hygiene? Well, it's like mental euthanasia, mental eugenics. We're going to eliminate from society the people that don't agree with us. The people that don't agree with us, we won't let them become leaders in any given area where they can influence more people. Kind of like what Aldous Huxley said in his book, Brave New World. Square pegs don't fit in round holes and tend to have dangerous thoughts about the social system and infect others with their discontent. So let's find out what Brandon's worldview is while he's in high school, channel him away from broadcasting. We can't have him infecting others with his worldview. And that would be true with you, whether you could let your child or grandchild become a doctor or a lawyer or a journalist or a pastor. And this is why we now have career channeling, which again, I warned about starting in my book in 95. And that's exactly what's happening today in great detail, as I did 2 shows this last week on inspired service and the new proposal for mandatory national testing, which will lead to national curriculum, and then mandatory national service at social justice type organizations, and then career assessment of big government and big business, planning who holds what jobs, a planned economy. People say that's crazy when I wrote this book in 95, and it's all happening here. But you see, it's mental hygiene. It is mental eugenics, moving people to the periphery who should not have any influence so they cannot infect others with their discontent. And that's what this is all about. In the same speech, John Rawlings Rees admitted their goal is propaganda, deception, and to infiltrate every power center in America and Great Britain when he declared, quote, "We have often been too spasmodic in our work, and I feel we need a long-term plan of propaganda. Here again, we had probably better be secretive and not mention this council or any other body, but simply write or speak as individuals. Public life, politics, and industry should all of them be within our sphere of influence. Parliament, the press, and other publications are the most obvious ways by which our propaganda can be got across." Wow. Here again, we had probably better be secretive and not mention this council or any other body. Your attention must not be confined merely to the daily press, for there are innumerable weekly and monthly journals and special professional and trade papers. Well, my friend Dennis Cuddy wrote, this again led to it being funded by the Rockefeller and a grant and the birth of the Tavistock Institute. But why do I mention the Frankfurt School again, or the Rockefeller Institute again, the Rockefeller Foundation? Because this leads us to this. which we discussed last week or 2 weeks ago. The scenario, sponsored by what? The Rockefeller Foundation. It was in 2010. It was a whole proposal on doing what? Lockstep. It was a scenario of a pandemic breaks out. And they said this occurred in 2012. Their report was 2010. They put their scenario 2 years into the future, 2012, said a pandemic would break out. Basically, everything would be shut down. Supply chains would break. Businesses closed down. Shops closed down. People wearing masks in public. And it looks at how to take advantage of the situation. And under technology and lockstep, at the very bottom where the arrow is, what do we see? Scanners using advanced functional magnetic imaging technology became the norm at airports and public areas to detect abnormal behavior that may indicate, quote, antisocial intent, end quote, may. So now we're back to the behavioral sciences. Now we're back to psychiatry, psychology, social sciences, controlling a population, what they believe, who might be dangerous. And again, here's the Rockefellers working and funding the Tavistock Institute back in the 40s to get started, and they're still funding this kind of trash today to really clamp down. So we go back to the little wheel at the World Economic Forum website, mental health, continuous monitoring. Again, how are they going to monitor? Digital economy and society. At the bottom, behavioral social sciences. Everything we're talking about. Harry Overstreet, chair of the Department of Philosophy and Psychology at City College of New York, he again ran in these same circles, said in his book in 1952 called The Great Enterprise, quote, through clinical experience, we have come to recognize one invariable characteristic of that sick condition of the mind we call neurosis, namely rigidity. The rigidity is found in several areas. In each of these, we can predict that the individual will respond with trigger quickness and in exactly the same way. Sometimes it appears such persons have constellation of prejudiced areas. A man, for example, may be angrily against race equality. What does that mean, race equality? Well, today, if you're a racist, if you're a capitalist, so who knows what that means anymore? It means you should be for redistribution of wealth or you're a racist. Socialism or you're a racist. Public housing, the TVA, financial and technical aid to backward countries, organized labor, and the preaching of a social rather than salvational religion. In other words, he's saying, hey, if you're not for socialism, if you're not for the social gospel, you may respond angrily as a racist would, and this again is showing us what your mental state is. He said, quote, try as we may, we can scarcely open up a subject that does not tap their primitive automatic againstness. Such people may appear normal in the sense that they are able to hold a job and otherwise maintain their status as a member of society, but they are, we now recognize, well along the road toward mental illness. In other words, they are showing antisocial behavior. So there we have at the center of the wheel. Again, behavioral sciences. This time we've highlighted technology, digitalization, and behavior. And what do we see highlighted at the bottom? Digital economy and society again. Digital identity at the top left. Digital identity. That's interesting. So one of the ways that we can control their behavior in a scientific manner is through more lockstep, power from the top down, digital identity, and a digital economy and society. Well, look at this, 1948 International Congress on Mental Health. They put out this statement. Principles of mental health cannot be successfully furthered in any society unless there is a progressive acceptance of the concept of world citizenship. World citizenship can be widely extended among all peoples through applications of the principles of mental health. This indeed is the chief problem, how to mobilize human will so that the individual and group resistance to change can be overcome. At a major turning point in world history, there is an obligation of social scientists and psychiatrists to attempt this new formulation, end quote. So now we know why behavioral sciences is at the center of the wheel in some of their studies. Now, at the center of the wheel, global governance. We highlight anti-globalism, and what pops up? Well, to the right, it goes immediately to the United States. Wait a minute, we've got an anti-globalism problem? Yeah, they just elected a guy in 2016 called Donald Trump who's about making America great again and has told the world court to go pound sand, has defunded the United Nations Education Scientific Organization, and has scolded the UN right in their own chamber in New York. Yeah, they have a little bit of an anti-globalism thing going on in America because he wants to build borders, make a strong America, put put America first and not have open society. So, yep, they got an anti-globalist problem in the United States. But notice also it goes off to the bottom, and that is highlighted values. So now they've got to deal with the values of anti-globalism. Well, look at the top. How could they do that? Well, maybe civic participation. Civic participation might be able to brainwash enough people to accept global values. And then we go back and we see again, even under behavioral sciences, they have civic participation highlighted. Then when we highlight behavior governance off to the left, what comes up? You end up with global governance. Look at that. Behavioral sciences, and then to the left, so behavioral sciences at the center, go to the left, what do you see highlighted? Behavior and governance. Go up to the top, what do you see? Global governance. Again, now go where the arrow's pointed, civic participation. So what's their goal? To use behavioral sciences to control behavior, to bring about global governance, and in part through values and civic participation. And then when we click on the new decision makers, who do we see those are going to be? To the top left, European Union, France. Really? European Union is going to be one of the biggest leaders in civic participation. Well, that's interesting because I predicted in my book, The Coming Religious Reich, that America and the world was going to a Eurocentric world government, that America would eventually, unfortunately, surrender to a world government centered in Europe, a Eurocentric world government. And here they say, we're going to go for global governance using civic participation, new decision makers, and this global governance, as they talk about at the very top, that's the very top one at the very top of that page, highlighted is global governance. They're going to use the European Union to help do that. Now again, civic participation is going to be one way they deal with the values problem and the anti-globalism problem in the United States. And interesting enough, what did we do last week? 2 one-hour shows last week, didn't we? On what? Inspired to Serve, the final report of the National Commission on Military, National, and Public Service. And what do they call for in this report? Among other things, drafting America's daughters, drafting women, but they also call for putting national service up under the Department of Education, a national test, which will lead to national curriculum. You can imagine what those values will be because they tell us it's going to be about collaboration. It's going to be about people's, quote, dispositions. It's a lot of emotionalism. And it's also based on the model of Public Allies, an organization started by the Obamas. Michelle Obama started the Chicago chapter before she was First Lady. And Public Allies, according to the people who went through it, was all about the different isms, phobias, and white privilege, and LGBTQ, and social justice. So Obama put together the commission as he was going out the door. The commission did their report. It came out in the end of March of this year, just a few weeks ago. And what are they calling for? Civic participation. So now they're going to promote globalism under the idea of, this is what we should do as patriotic, God-fearing people. And they talk a little bit about the Constitution and the Founding Fathers. The same thing that Roger Baldwin, the communist, the self-admitted communist, Roger Baldwin, who started the American Civil Liberties Union, said, we'll wrap ourselves in the flag, gets lots of flags, talk about the Constitution and quote the Founding Fathers while we promote our communism. Well, they're doing the same thing here with civic participation, civic service, which is all tied back to the World Core Curriculum at the United Nations. Again, predicted that in my book, 1995. You see how it's going? Now again, most people could not read this trash over at the World Economic Forum and even know what they're reading, but you and I do, because together we have learned and done this for many years, close to 30 years on my end. And many of you have done this as well. So you know what's going on. Your friends and family look at this and they believe the masking terms. They don't know what these words actually mean. But here again is the Inspired to Serve document. And they openly state under this website that's tied to this, AmeriCorps, that they want you to become a change agent. You want to become a community change agent? Then become a part of this. And think global, act local. You believe in social justice. Oh, wait a minute. You're going to be a champion for what? Sustainable solutions. And of course, this is all about sustainable development, and AmeriCorps is all about sustainable development. They're all about Agenda 2030 all over their websites. You don't have to say, that might be. No, it is. They openly brag about it. They admit it. This is what they do. So we're back to, again, civic participation at the center, and we see that it also includes other things such as corporate governance. Again, we're going to merge big government, big business. We're going to tie the values to it. Then we'll give preferential hiring. Preferential hiring to those kids who get the right values in civic participation. Those who believe in group participation, collectivism, world values, global values. We'll get big corporations to agree to hire them first. How do we know that? Because they brag about it on their website. Where did we predict that? In our book in 1995. This is what they wrote about. This is not new. They're just using this crisis to do it. Again, under civic participation, we highlighted responding to shifts in power. Where does the power go? LGBTQ, inclusion at the very bottom. The middle, it goes to youth perspective. So we'll ask the youth, and we're going to switch the power to the youth. Because why? The older folks are out of date and out of touch. Isn't that what Maria von Trapp was told when she went to the school assemblies? Maria von Trapp writes about in her book, we were told that ignore your parents, they're old, they're out of touch, you're the future, you're the future, you're the generation of the future. Yeah, so we're going to switch this to the youth, to the millennials and younger. And again, at the very top, what's the goal? Global governance. Their words, not mine. You can go see this yourself. And then we see the United States. To the left, transparency. We highlight that. What do we get? Illicit economy. They're worried about our illicit economy there at the World Economic Forum, tied back to the UN, who had Chinese dictators speak a few years ago at their conference. And they're worried about our corruption. How about being worried about the corruption at the UN and the guys with the little blue helmets going around raping children? Perverts. And you're worried about us? And then taxation. So they're worried about the United States and our transparency, and they don't like our taxation. I guess it's too capitalistic for them, or free market. But they're worried about our illicit economy. What's illicit mean? Disapproved or not permitted for moral or ethical reasons. They don't like our economy for moral reasons, or ethical reasons. Again, United States. Now we click future orientation of government. What do we get? The very top, we get financial and monetary systems. So they're going to redo our whole monetary system. At the very bottom, what do we get? Digital economy and society. So the future orientation of government is going to be a lockdown of digital economy and society. And then to the far left, what do we have? That one highlighted, again, civic participation. Getting ideas, civic participation is the new way for brainwashing. Then we have blockchain in the center. We highlight governance and law. What does that lead to? Workforce and employment. Yep. That means we're going to tie your work and everything you're doing to a blockchain, a digital system, just as the United Nations is calling for, by the way. And as we've detailed in shows last year, we showed you where the United Nations, through the Department of Education, on the current Department of Education Secretary Betsy DeVos, they're working toward tracking the values of kids all the way through their career. We showed you the articles, many of them from reputable websites, admitting this was what was in the press release. They're going to track the values of the kids and tie it to their portfolio that follows in their whole life. Well, now they can do it with a blockchain or digitally. Then again, what do we see above workforce and employment? Global governance, education and skills, digital economy and society. Again, what do you see at the far bottom right? Civic participation. What's that have to do with blockchain? Give people a chip. Give them biometrics. It'll house everything. Their immigration, their vaccines, their work history, everything. This is how you control society. And of course, this will lead us to a digital dollar that we talked about already. We already see this is going on with a censure. It's through the Federal Reserve. We see that David Treat, who's been a part of this, and it's being worked out now, is a part of the World Economics Forum. We see that he was a part of ID 2020, which again, the ID 2020 and the service mark, this biometric, where was it launched? Economic Forum in Davos. And what do we see as one of the goals of sustainable development? By 2030, provide legal identity for all, including birth registration. Biometrics, USA Today, from back when? 2017. You will get chipped eventually. And then we showed you last year, this screenshot. UN agency selects a censure for biometric project. So we'll do it for vaccines, education, jobs. We'll do it for immigration. We'll do it for a digital dollar. We can take the digital dollar and then turn it into a blockchain of biometrics. And then here's the World Bank. Well, there's your banking. World Bank, tied back to the UN. A censure, call for what? Universal ID. Then we go to climate change in the center. What do we have under climate change? The Paris Agreement. Didn't Trump get us out of that? Yeah, that's one reason why they got an anti-globalism problem in the U.S. they got to deal with, which is maybe why they're trying to collapse America using the coronavirus, because guess what the latest survey I just found is? A big jump in people now wanting mandatory minimum government incomes. A big jump since the coronavirus, and people polled by Rasmussen wanting government mandatory minimum incomes. Oh, then we go to taxation, and what do they have? They talk about how we have inequality and taxation. Off to the far right, again, global governance. Everything ties back to that, doesn't it? Values to the far left. Again, United Nations came out last week, April 1st, and said what? We want a 10% of entire planet's annual income in fund for coronavirus. Then you got the role of religion. Faith and development. We're going to use religion for sustainable development. Yep, that's exactly like we found in this book from 1992, Sustainable Development and Religion. This whole book is about religion and using religion to push sustainable development. And guess who has an article in here? Richard Land of the Southern Baptist Convention. Right there. Yep, we're going to use the useful idiots. Yep, that's why I wrote the book called Marxianity, Marxism and Christianity Merging. How the evangelical deep state and their useful idiots are merging Marxism and Christianity through social justice, white privilege, cultural Marxism, illegal immigration, interfaith dialogue. Yeah, because since 1992, I've had this document. Again, sustainable development from the UN, religious leaders, including the largest Protestant denomination represented, Southern Baptist Convention, to use religion to push it. Well, they openly state that over at the World Economic Forum website. They're going to use religion for faith and global development. And we could just keep doing this all night long. Look at that. Workforce and employment, training and certification systems. Again, what I warned about in my book in 95, that eventually everybody will get a file opened on them, just like in China, called a Dangan, that follows them their whole life. I wrote about that in 95. People said that would never come to America. Well, here we are with social credit scores, and now the Department of Education admitting this is part of a UN plan that will also track their values. Education and skills, again, the bottom line is big government, big education merging together. Global risk at the final bottom. Who are the global risk? China and the United States. Well, I can see why China's a problem. Well, why is that a problem? Well, I guess that's stopping global governance, because to the bottom far right highlighted global risk, we got global governance issues in China and the United States. Well, we got to get the United States on board for that. And of course, then we have the former Prime Minister of the UK, Gordon Brown, saying what? The coronavirus would be a great time to go to world government. And what's back at the center? Where we started. Now, you tell me they're not using the coronavirus and exploiting a crisis and fanning the flames, scaring the living daylights out of people, destroying the capital markets, destroying our economy, redistributing the wealth, and getting people to be conditioned to accept things they otherwise would never have accepted. Just like James McGregor Burns, the globalist, said in his 1984 book, The Power to Lead. The founding fathers have been too smart for us, too shrewd for us. We could never get the American people to go where we want them to go, except for a stupendous political and economic crisis. Remolding it nearer to the heart's desire, blowing more air on the fire, taking a crisis, a legitimate concern, the coronavirus, blowing it up and using it to scare people. So much contradiction, so much anxiety and fear thrown at them that they finally throw up their arms with the Tavistock method and they surrender. And now you're watching people do it to the point they shame anyone who's going to Lowe's to buy flowers. My friends, this has been a large psychological operation program. You can't deny it. They are saying they're going to use all of this to go to world government. Their words, not mine. Their little wheel you could spend hours on. Not my wheel, their little wheel. There are many things connected here. Psychological, religious, economic, political, geopolitical. And unless you understand how the puzzle fits together, you won't have a clue what's going on. You can see all of these things as bits and pieces, but if you want to understand what's happening, you've got to understand the big picture, which means you need to become an approved workman who needeth not to be ashamed, who can rightfully divide the word of truth, which then brings discernment to understand what's happening. But my friends, if you're out there tonight and you're not a believer, I don't know how you sleep at night. I hope you'll tune in next Sunday night as I share with you on Resurrection Sunday why I'm a Christian. And finally, if you appreciate our broadcast, I hope you'll support what we're doing. If you will join our VIP club, where we archive over 1,600 TV shows, ebooks, audiobooks, transcripts, and more, I'll send you my documentary, Sabotage, 6 hours for free, as my way of saying thank you. I'll also send you my book, Marxianity. I'll send you both of these for free as my way of saying thank you if you join our VIP club, where we archive all of our years of programs just like this. You can join at wvwtv.com/subscription. wvwtv.com/subscription. The other way you can support us is with a tax-deductible contribution at wvwfoundation.com. You'll also find our mailing address there. wvwfoundation.com. Well, my friends, I hope that tonight's program has served you to help you understand how the globalists and the cultural Marxists, even within our own government, will exploit a crisis to pull off a psychological warfare program on the American people and to condition them to give up their liberties and freedoms. What are they planning next? What have they learned by this little operation? How far can they get Americans to go? Well, my friends, that may very well depend on you and me. Thanks so much for watching. Till next time, I'm Brandon House. Take care.